Are you the quantum mechanics?
Yes, we are the Quantum Mechanics, the paranormal podcast for the believers, the doubters, and everyone in between. Ben, I've got a little bit of weirdness connected with last week's episode.
Oh, yes.
We recorded that one remotely, which we've not done for a while. We did a lot during COVID. And to be honest, I don't think what I'm going to tell you is particularly paranormal. It's probably a user error. But we sounded terrible. I had real problems editing it. Our levels were all over the place. If you listen carefully and know what you're listening to, you probably will know it if you listen back. So, yeah, that was a bit of a weird thing. And then I always do a little bit at the end, a little technical bit at the end to improve the sound. And I did that. And then I uploaded it to our podcast platform. And then when I went to play it back, it cut me out of the episode, Ben.
Really?
Yeah, it was just you. So there'd be like these huge, because it was at my episode, I was doing the stories, there'd be huge gaps.
Just me going,
yeah. Oh, that sounds interesting.
Wait,
Silent.
so were you in the waveform?
No. I'm not saying anything weird about that. It's probably I just hit the wrong button and there's probably some stereo mix and it just didn't put one channel in, or you know what I mean? It's like, it's nothing particularly weird. But what it reminded me of, every episode we've had real problems about with things like that have been about haunted objects.
Oh, that's true, actually. Yes.
We always have these gremlins that pick up. And like I said, it's probably, we've not done a Zoom one for a while, so we're a bit out of practice. You know, as they say in the trade, Ben, both mine and yours mic control was terrible. And then, yeah, for some reason, I'd obviously hit some button and I cut myself out of the podcast.
That's weird, because we once had to re-record an entire episode because the machine had failed, which it never does.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that was the haunted objects one.
Well, here's the one that is a little bit weirder. So like I said, technical, probably. Coincidence, yes. I was listening back to it, just checking it once I'd uploaded it properly, got it to work properly. It reminded me of when we did the haunted objects one many years ago. I was listening back to that episode. I don't know if you remember this. And in another room, I was on my own. In another room, TV just turned itself on.
Yes, I do remember that. Yes.
Now, that was, as far as I remember, that was haunted objects. So I'm listening back to this one on haunted dolls. And I'm listening to the stories about Robert the doll. And there's the bit where he's up in the attic, you know, and people are hearing footsteps and all weird noises coming upstairs, and it's only the doll that's up there, yeah?
Yes.
And then weird noises upstairs, what sounded like footsteps and things banging around upstairs. I'm the only one in the house. I'm like, oh, that's really freaky. Thought, it's the dog, right?
Yeah, I would have thought so.
Turn round. Dog's asleep next to me.
Okay. But you have got kids. It could be them.
No, they were at school.
Oh, they were at school, sorry.
Yeah, I was on my own, apart from me and the dog. So it was like, oh, that's really weird. And I thought, I'm not freaking myself out. So I just ploughed on. I ignored it. I was maybe a little bit, didn't really want to go upstairs and check it out. So I left it and it was fine. But I thought it was weird that when we did the haunted objects one, the TV turned itself on while I was listening back. This one, I'm listening to Robert the doll making loads of noise in the house upstairs, and I get weird noises from upstairs.
Well, the other one that always gets us is when we do the Standing Stones with James, and we get strange stuff happening to our cars.
Yeah.
And we're going to be doing that next month.
Oh, God.
I know.
What are we doing to ourselves? Yeah.
Well, they do say you were trapped. I mean, I remember Trudy warning us, you have to do, whatever you believe, you have to do some sort of protection.
And we also did a little survey on Patreon, so patreon.com/TQM pod, of our Patreons to find out what the spookiest doll was that we covered in the Haunted Dolls episode. Had a bit of response. It was interesting. There seemed to be some shifting sands. I think Evan had said that he was fully on the Robert the doll as the most scary doll. But after hearing the podcast, he now thinks the Elsa the doll that did that weird laughing and keeps coming back, that has now taken over as number one, we think.
I think just because of the malevolence of it, Robert is still... But Evan also mentioned there's a clicking doll, right?
Yeah, I haven't checked that out yet.
No, I must watch that. I've been away for a week, so I've sort of been off grid, but I'm going to dive in and have a look at that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Evan. Thank you to all our patrons. And we've got a new Patreon as well. We'd like to welcome Nicola, who's joined us as a patron on the Quantum Mechanics. So we really appreciate it. You get stuff early. We're posting more stuff there. There's a good little community going, and it helps us out. $5 a month is our tier, isn't it? For an assistant mechanic, I think we call it.
It is about mechanics assistant.
That's the one. That's the one I'm looking for. So yeah, come and join us at patreon.com/TQM pod if you fancy supporting us, and you can. That'd be great.
And just to show the value, I've been away for a week down in Devon, Dorset, Somerset, that area. And I got a coffee from a service station yesterday. £6.40 for a decaf flat white.
Yeah, it's a cliche, isn't it? It's cheaper to be a mechanic's assistant than buy a coffee.
That was
much cheaper.
Extraordinary.
Was it a nice coffee?
Yeah, it was all right. I have to do the decaf because otherwise I get wobbly. Decaf is always like a level below normal stuff, but it was okay. It was fine. It was
fine. Be cheaper if it's decaf, I think.
Well, yeah. I don't even know how they decaf it. I don't know what happens to all the caffeine.
Process, they probably, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I probably don't want to know.
No, you don't want to know.
Anyway, for this episode, because I was out in the wilds and we'd rented this lovely little sort of Airbnb, and out the back through my bedroom window, I could see all through I was going to say Devon countryside. We're kind of on the border, so Devon and Dorset and associated countrysides.
Lovely part of the world.
Lovely part of the world. And I was reading up about wild men that had been seen in the area, and obviously, we've just been cryptid hunting, and so for one final time this year, I dived back into the Cassiopeian tapes because there's some fascinating stuff. If I mention Nessie and Bigfoot, this isn't stuff you would have heard before, I guarantee, because it was kind of like eye-raising, and the CIA make an appearance in this.
Oh,
yeah, I know.
I love the CIA.
When I started doing the research, I was just having a little look around. I thought people haven't seen Nessie for ages, have they? Oh, turns out they have. Yeah. A man called Parry Marm and his family were visiting the area and staying up near a place called Urquhart Castle, which is that sort of famous castle on the...
It's slightly ruined, but still looks really spooky and atmospheric. It's almost like if you could almost think of a holiday brochure of a castle, it's like that, isn't it?
That's it, yeah. And like most of these accounts, he said, at first thought it was driftwood, but it slowly makes its way towards the castle. Looks like a head coming above the waves. And he took a picture. I've saved this I've just grabbed. This is from, as you would imagine, I think this is from The Sun. So it's not particularly difficult to find. Oh, just hold that picture up. It's what you'd expect, isn't it?
I've seen that one.
It sort of looks a bit like the surgeon's picture, a bit, which obviously is a fake. We know that.
But could be an otter. Do you know what I mean?
It could be an otter. It could be anything. I thought, let's see what the Cassiopeian tapes have to say about it. So if you recall, this is from a Substack I've been following for a while now, and there's a website, and indeed there's a book. This is about a team of people who use channeling techniques to talk to a entity, some entities, it's not entirely clear, that they call the Cassiopeians. So it's sort of, the technique that they have is somewhere between, I would say, talking to spirits and channeling another intelligence, an off-world intelligence. It's sort of halfway between that. It's always kind of left up to interpretation, really. But the sessions are always a Q&A type of thing.
There was something about it last time you covered it, reminded me a little bit about remote viewing. It's more that approach, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, absolutely. Remote viewing is a thing, and funnily enough, remote viewing comes up here.
Okay.
The first Cassiopeian session that I found from this whole section in the Substack was about Nessie and Bigfoot. From 1994, the question is, they want to know what the Loch Ness Monster is.
Right.
And the answer very quickly comes back. It's a serpent. It's 40 foot long on average, and there's 51 in the lake. They live in an underwater cavern system and are leftovers from pre-cataclysmic times. So there's kind of like this idea that there was some event which changed life on Earth. And we kind of know that that is true, right? With sort of the dinosaurs and whatever.
Should be the Loch Ness Monsters.
Right, absolutely. But you think 51, that seems a lot. Well, we'll come and we'll clear that bit up.
That's quite specific, isn't it?
51, yes.
Wow, okay.
They also say, are there any huge monsters at the bottom of the ocean? And this is much more down to earth. They say, yeah, giant squid.
I'd love them to go, nah. That's Loch Ness.
There's a giant squid, 1,000 foot long, and there's 20,000 of them, they reckon. Wow. And then the most disappointing answer was, are there any leftover dinosaurs in the jungles of Africa or South America? No. Sadly, no. Later on, they pursue this line of questioning in March 2021, so, 30 years later. Why is it that the Loch Ness Monster and other similar creatures are said to exist, but have never been seen and documented like other animals that live on the planet?
Good question.
And the answer comes back just as simple: transdimensional. Okay, we're going through.
Did we have a bit of transdimensional last time as well?
We did have a bit of transdimensional. It seems like there's a lot of
go-to, isn't it?
It is a bit, yeah, and.
Covers a lot of sins, though, a transdimensional answer, doesn't it? That's
why I said I'm not going to revisit this too often, but I do think there's an interesting take on here. And as I say, it does reference something that I was very surprised to find in the CIA archives. So they say, well, look, so you mean that they're not really here? Is it on its own frequency that causes it to blink in and out of reality? And they said, yeah. So they said, what, like in a time warp or something? I'm like, yeah, okay. And then they sort of go on and question, like, well, how is it that some people can see it, some people get to see it, some people don't get to see it? And the answer is that it has something to do with your belief, which I find very difficult to understand. How can what they're suggesting is that your belief in it being a transdimensional animal means that you can see it.
Two things. It's kind of a bit Tolpa-like in that sense, but it's also reminded me of that Ted Danson movie about Loch Ness Kids movie. I think the character in that goes, you have to believe it to see it.
Yeah. Well, that's also the plot of the Family Ness cartoon as well. So do you remember the two kids, Angus and can't remember the girl's name? They have thistle whistles. And sometimes the adults can see them and sometimes they can't. It depends on, there's this idea that they're just the figment of the imagination of the children. It's very much that same kind of deal.
But I've never seen that series, so I don't believe it exists.
Oh, that was classic children's television after school, that was. It was brilliant. The Family Ness. So they go on and ask, well, what does he eat? And the answer is, whatever he wants, with an exclamation mark. Okay, well, if it eats whatever he wants, does that mean he can eat people? No, mouth too small. Vegetarian for the most part, but not exclusively. We kind of get this idea that there's this relict species and...
that keep popping in and out.
That keep popping in and out, yeah, absolutely. And they do point out that John Keel, off of Mothman Prophecies fame...
Yeah.
He did say that he thought that he called them swamp slobs. So he was talking about lake creatures, because obviously we've got Champ in America and there's loads of them. He called them temporary psychic projections, so mindless manifestations of energy. He was sort of not necessarily saying that they were animals in their own right, but he was saying there was something to do with the observer's belief or expectations that was causing them to exist.
So again, that kind of slightly ties into the idea of a tulpa, that you there's some energy around and maybe you imagine that into some kind of form.
Exactly.
You can extrapolate.
And there's another reference here. So I haven't checked out this book, but it's on my reading list now. Quite hard, I found, to get hold of in the UK, but I think I found a source. An author called Ted Holliday, and he wrote a book in 1973 called The Dragon and the Disc, an investigation into the totally fantastic, where he talks about the Ness monsters being transitory and ghost-like and some kind of manifestation. He references, in the 1980s, a remote viewing program called Grill Flame and Stargate. And so we know about Stargate, don't we? We've covered Stargate.
So Stargate was the secret military project into remote viewing, and for those of you who are not across remote viewing, it's basically by concentrating your energy and using techniques you can basically see or place yourself in any space or time. So the military used it to kind of see what Russian submarines were being built and stuff like that. But the US military had it as a project for a number of years, spent, I think it was $25 million on it, and had an active program and a manual that we went through. So big stuff.
That's right. So, it was US Army Intelligence, INSCOM, and they were using these sort of, I guess you'd put in inverted commas, fun targets to do calibration. So...
Right, okay, that makes sense.
And amongst them was indeed the Loch Ness Monster. And INSCOM said, well, the Loch Ness Monster were not biological entities. They seemed to be transitory manifestations, and they materialised and dematerialised. They weren't in the loch all the time, but they very much looked, in their apparitional form, like plesiosaurs. And that is something that we hear time and time again. I just thought, well, I've got to look into Project Grill Flame. What was it? What do they say about the Loch Ness Monster?
Does sound like it's available at JML for $19.99,
doesn't it? The Project Grill Flame. What a weird thing. So I did find it. It's there. It's all in the CIA archives.
Oh, I love those archives.
Project Grill Flame was a joint DIA and Army effort, with DIA providing overall project management and coordination. The project's main goals, and I'm quoting directly here, were to evaluate the threat that foreign psychoenergetics achievements might pose to the US national security, and to explore the potential of psychoenergetics for the use in the US intelligence collection. So I think, in plain English, it's like psychic warfare. They're practicing the impact of psychic warfare, because there was this big worry that the Soviets were getting very good at remote viewing. And if you recall, in that one of those previous episodes where we covered remote viewing, there was even a thought that you could have combat in the remote viewing space.
Right. Wow. That's another movie, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it would be actually. Yeah. There probably is one.
There's got to be, isn't there?
Their two main goals really was to establish ESP and remote viewing as a personal ability from the people who were taking part in the project, and to look at the influence that they could have on physical and biological systems. That's that warfare side.
As far as I understand it, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that's where it kind of deviates a little bit from remote viewing, because I'd always seen remote viewing of you're not influencing things.
No, absolutely.
You're observing, but they seem to have almost taken it another strand of, could we influence something? Is that what you're saying?
That's right. Yeah. So out of the findings, there's the key findings of Grill Flame were that remote viewing is a real phenomenon. I think we've established that. But it also says it has the potential for US intelligence applications. And at this stage, it's just for development of descriptive sketches and configurations of basically adversaries, systems, and potential threats. But it does conclude that there is a potential threat to US national security from the USSR in China from their well-funded and government-backed psychoenergetics programs. So basically, they're saying that there is possibly something here that we have to look out for in terms of actual, I guess, more conventional warfare where you could influence somebody remotely or even damage them. But then the second part of it is the thing that I was like, wow. So they talk about this linguist and ex-former INSCOM intelligence officer, Ed Dames. Now, I had never heard of Ed Dames before. It turns out that he is a bit of a hero in the RV community, and lots of people, there's even some people who say that this chap, perhaps he is a front for things. He's not perhaps the person that they say he is. Right. Although, I don't know. I'm not covering that now. All I'm going to say is that he was trained by Ingo Swann in the early 80s. Right. He was described as a teenage surfer, then a soldier, widely considered intelligent and creative. But he had this, I guess, penchant for remote viewing, the incredibly weird. So his targets included flying saucers, aliens, Atlantis, the Virgin Mary, and the Loch Ness Monster. And he described the Loch Ness Monster as a dinosaur's ghost.
Wow. Oh, that must have been music to your ears.
It really was music to my ears. Yeah.
So just for our listeners, so if you don't know, Ingo Swann was, I guess you'd call him the grandfather of remote viewing?
Absolutely, he is, yeah.
So this was almost one of his students, his
He's
proteges.
one of his proteges, yeah, totally, yeah. And what was also intriguing, I'm going to have to go back to this paper because I highlighted in my notes that while he was engaged in advanced training targets, and the ones I've just read out include that those are his advanced training targets.
Yeah.
He said, and I quote, "I think I had some kind of experiences, some kind of disturbance from unknown spirits." This is where we get into the world of really peculiar. We have intelligence and military meeting the Loch Ness Monster and then other entities. But I think, one of the reasons why this paper is referenced in the Cassiopeian Substack is because there's a sort of a notion that perhaps the Cassiopeians, because of their sort of similarity with remote viewing and such, perhaps these unknown entities that are being described here by Danes, perhaps that is what they are getting here from the Cassiopeia Project. I'm sort of speculating here because they don't make that direct link, but I think that there is an indirect link being suggested here.
But it's also making me think back about when we interviewed Paul H. Smith, who was one of the senior people in the remote viewing program in the military. We were lucky enough to do an interview with him a while back. So if you've not heard that, go check it out because it is fascinating. But I remember him talking about test targets. I think I've got this right. And he was saying it was like a diner or something they were set. There was something around that. So I always felt when talking to him, because the theory is you can travel in any space or time, but it looked like the military were almost playing down those elements of it. They were always logical targets. It was done as a manual. So I kind of felt this surfer guy that you're talking about, the disciple, you would, wouldn't you? You'd go, hold on a second, if this thing, you can go anywhere in space or time, I'm going to go and check out the Virgin Mary, or I'm going to check out the Loch Ness Monster. I'm going to see if that's real, UFOs. But you could almost feel the pressure of the military going, can we just keep it to a submarine base? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I remember covering, so Ingo Swann remote viewed Mars in the past.
Right.
And do you remember he saw the naked miners?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's where, we speculated at the time, maybe it's true, but you're going to have much more difficulty getting funding from Congress if you're talking about Loch Ness monsters or hot naked miners on Mars than you are about Soviet submarine capabilities.
That was the original name of the flying pickets, hot naked miners on Mars.
They should have stuck with that, to be honest.
Didn't take off.
That was disappointing because I know that Daz Smith on his YouTube channel has done some remote viewing of some sort of more eccentric targets like this, and they're always the most fascinating.
He'd done Roswell, hadn't he? And
he'd done Roswell,
and Phoenix Lights as well. I remember him talking about that briefly.
That's right, yes.
But you can see why the military, it must have been difficult enough to get all those millions of dollars of funding without having somebody chipping up who looks like a surfer dude saying, oh, I just remote viewed the Virgin Mary. You know what I mean? It's like, shut up.
Yeah.
So you can see why it might have almost been suppressed. I remember when we were talking to Paul H. Smith when we interviewed him. I don't know if it was at the end after we'd finished recording or it's on the episode. I can't remember back that far. But we started to talk to him and ask him more about those, let's call them exotic targets.
Yes.
He wasn't like evasive about them, but he didn't really you didn't get the impression that he wanted to talk about them. But there was something he said, oh yeah, no, I'm not into all that. But there was one point where he said, apart from the moon, there's a weird thing about the moon. And we were like, what? And he was like,
yes.
I'll tell you about that another time. It was like, what?
Yeah, totally. Yes, I totally remember that.
But my point is, I think if you're part of the program and you're getting military funding, you'd want to play down all those exotic targets, because that's the kind of thing where you've got some guy who's signing off the check who goes, well, they got some good results at submarine base in Russia. Now they're saying they're going to the moon and Mars in the past. Oh my God, you know what I mean? You can see why.
Yeah, you can. Basically, the Cassiopeians and Project Grill Flame both agree that Nessie is either, well, the ghost of a dinosaur, but another way of putting that would be a transitory apparition, basically, that lives in a different dimension. I mean, as we can't define what a ghost is, that works. And there's 51 of them. It's
also making me think, and maybe you're going to make this connection or maybe it ties in, but tulpas are going through my mind quite a lot. So the idea that if you...
That's sort of the Keelian explanation there, yeah.
Exactly. And it makes sense, doesn't it, with the Loch Ness Monster? We did Sherlock Holmes as our tulpa project, but actually the Loch Ness Monster would have been a really good one. Hard to get in your room if you're imagining him, but if you're at Loch Ness and there's so much energy going towards that loch that wants it to be real. And I remember even as a kind of young adult staying in a little cottage on Loch Ness, looking out the window, going, "Who's that?" Just waves and just. But you kind of want it to happen, so it's perfect tulpa territory, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I remember going there for the first time. I don't know, maybe I was about 8, and I was just because at that time, when you're 8, your whole world is most of it is fantasy anyway. Yeah. And my dad had given me loads of books and articles about the Loch Ness Monster before we went. My mum was excited about the red squirrels. I and my dad were excited about the Loch Ness Monster. And I was convinced all you had to do was turn up and it would be there. Yeah. And I remember looking out across the lake going, well, it'll be here any minute. And almost thinking, I better take the dog away from the edge of the lake so he doesn't get eaten. Yeah. But no, obviously not. Obviously I didn't see anything. And it was one of the great disappointments. And I think that's where this emanates from, because if you grew up with those legends, you're very disappointed when they don't come true. And like I mentioned, Champ there, the American lake monster that's most famous there. And I think there's the same thing of there's people who've seen Champ and swear by it and everybody else wants to see it. But I just thought that was so interesting. So basically what they're saying is if you believe in it and it's decided to come into this dimension, in this spectral plane, you might see it. That's when we move on to Bigfoot, and they say, as with Nessie, most researchers have theorized that Bigfoot is simply a flesh and blood type ape or relic species. Again, Keel thought they were at least 2 different types, an animal of some sort and a paranormal being. The paranormal hypothesis only started getting more attention in the field in the last decade or 2. And then there's this, I have read this and I will do it at some point. The reason I haven't done Bigfoot in the past really is because we like to take sort of quite niche topics and delve into them. And I don't think Bigfoot is niche anymore, and there's whole podcasts dedicated to Bigfoot, and they are much better placed to cover Bigfoot because all I can do is tell you a little bit about it.
Huge boots to fill. But there's a brilliant book which I have read and I recommend, Joshua Cutchin, Where the Footprints End, from 2020. And he says Bigfoot sightings are riddled with such accounts, tales of disappearing entities, strange lights, 3-toed tracks, trackways simply ending in snow-covered fields. Reminds you of the Christmas, snow devil footprints. Yeah. I'm thinking UFOs there as well. Yes, mimicry and shape-shifting. Bulletproof wild men. So we've come across this before with cryptids. The accounts that we've had from the Land Between the Lakes, the LBL with the werewolf that was shot at and apparently was affected but unharmed really by a bullet. Good name for a band, Bulletproof Wildman. It is, isn't it? Yeah. If there's any bands listening who want some names, come here. We've got loads of them. And there are even stories where Bigfoot are more akin to poltergeist, ghosts, old world fairies and witches than living creatures. Again, when you read that book, there is some similarity between some Bigfoot sightings and, Jeff, the talking mongoose. Right. The apparition of the mongoose, it's only the difference between the apparitions. There are some people who've had Bigfoot infesting their houses, very similar to what
Jeff did.
Yeah.
The Cassiopeians imply something in between the two options. The first reference to Bigfoot is made in October 1994. And I love the way this conversation goes. So the question, going actually back to what I was saying there about Ingo Swann, was Mars ever inhabited? Yes, says the Cassiopeians.
By Bigfoot?
Well, by those you know as Sasquatch or Bigfoot, yes.
Oh, wow.
Do they now live on this planet as a result of being brought here by other beings? They're transitory. They do not inhabit on a permanent basis. So again, is this a get out clause? I don't know.
Makes them sound... That does sound very Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, doesn't it? They just stay there, kind of milk a planet until they can't use it anymore, and then they go. But that would imply that they have got spaceships or some other way of travelling around the universe.
Well, we're going to sort of come on to that. Right. So they point out that it's been claimed that Bigfoot were the survivors of a planetary catastrophe in our solar system, but the planet is now in our asteroid belt. And like Keel, they also claim that there were multiple Bigfoot types, one of which matches the description of a thought form. So the Cassiopeia Project, they interestingly use the phrase window faller rather than thought form or tulpa. Right. And so their language, window faller, it is it basically means a cryptid which comes out of someone's imagination. So it's basically a tulpa, but they avoid using the word tulpa, I think, because it has connotations sort of from a different belief system. I think that's the reason why.
Spiritual.
Yeah.
Sorry, are they saying that Bigfoot is what they call it, a window, right? A tulpa-esque type thing, right?
Well, no. So that they're
saying not. It's from this planet that's in the belt. No. That is what various people call from. So a book called The Law of One by Ra, and also Keel they've both said that is possibly what's happened. Right. In fact, this guy Ra says there are two races which use the we came across this before, the second density, i.e. animal form on Earth. One of the entities of the planet sphere you call Maldek. So Maldek is this supposed planet which was destroyed where the Bigfoot lived and is now part of the asteroid belt, and they dwell within your deeper underground passageways, and these ones are known to you as Bigfoot. The other race is designed to offer appropriately engineered physical vehicles for humans in the event that there is a nuclear war, okay? These are beings which exist as instinctual second density beings which are held in reserve to form what you would call a gene pool in case these bodies are needed. Right, okay. So now we start going... You're going to have to go back because you lost me a bit on that. Are they saying they're like angels who are going to save us, or is that something different?
Well, no, they are basically saying that there's this other non-transitory race of Bigfoot who will repopulate the Earth should humans destroy themselves.
Right, so they're a safety mechanism.
Yes, they're a safety mechanism.
It's making me think about Chewbacca in a whole different light.
Isn't it, right? Absolutely. And this lot, they dwell in the uninhabited deep forest, and they're just basically waiting for us to press the nuclear button. Very, very, very strange sort of notion, I think, but yeah.
It's making me think, I wonder what they're thinking. Are they thinking, should they just get on with it, or are they just... going, I hope they never do. It's fun.
I hope, but I mean, how come the Bigfoots wouldn't be affected? Maybe that's why they're living in the deep forest, because they're like, no, we'll be safe out here.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get back to the Cassiopeian tapes and not so much speculation. So the question is, well, how do they come and go? The answer is, well, they are slaves and pets of the lizard beings.
Oh, of course, it's always the bloody lizard people. At some point, you're going to end up with the lizard people, aren't you?
Everything, isn't it Goddard's law that every argument on the internet goes back to the Nazis? I think.
Yeah. This is the opposite way round, isn't it?
Yeah. This is the TQM law. Everything goes back.
How
to
long
the
can we
beings.
get through an episode without mentioning the lizard people? Oh, that's brilliant.
So how did Sasquatch get here from Mars? Can you guess?
The lizard people brought them?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
But they do not inhabit Earth. That is what the Cassiopeians say.
But what are the lizard people? So hold on a second. The Cassiopeians, if I'm remembering this correctly, from the other time they popped up, the lizard people were at the top of the tree then, right?
Correct.
And then
they were the people eaters.
They were the purple people eaters, and then the greys were like subservient to them.
That's right.
So now we've got the Sasquatch thrown into the mix as well.
Yes. So it looks like they're here for menial tasks and also pet duties. So basically, a little bit like a guide dog, you know, they do some things, they pick up some things to study, to collect some earth samples, but also they curl up at the end of their bed. That is like the explanation.
Okay, so this has implications if we link the two stories that we've covered with the Cassiopeian. Here's what I don't understand.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't believe I said that sentence out loud. So you got the lizard people. They're a given, right?
Right, they're a given.
They have got the greys.
Yes.
Yeah. And the greys come down in their ships and do whatever the greys do and then go back to the ships.
Yeah, probing and collecting samples.
Doing whatever they do. But then we've got the Bigfoot, the Sasquatch, who are also subservient to the lizard people. But unlike the greys, they're hanging about on Earth.
Yes, they're hanging about on Earth. I mean,
so
they don't live here.
No, but what do you mean? Well, so they go back up to the ship like the greys?
That's the implication,
Okay,
from the
right.
Cassiopeians, because they specifically say they don't live here.
Okay.
And this would blend in, not blend in, this would support other people that have said that they have seen Sasquatch associated with UFOs, so either coming in or out of other craft, essentially. Although, obviously, it is possible to have a Bigfoot sighting without a craft, and that is where you get the convenient explanation of there being two sorts of Bigfoots.
I want to know, so if we go with this, I want to know, so did the lizard people, did they create the Sasquatch?
No, they rescued them from
which makes sense.
Planet.
So that explains why they're furry and the greys and the lizard people aren't furry.
That's right. There was more of an implication that the greys may be engineered than the Sasquatch. The Sasquatch appear to be just a race of rescued beings. If they are what they say, what the Cassiopeians say they are, that is what they are.
Yeah, I just want to go.
Well, it isn't just the Cassiopeians who talk about this. I've mentioned him a number of times before. I do know him somewhat personally. Timothy Good, who, in my opinion, is the best researcher on, I guess you would call it the hard UFO. So he's a researcher. He believes, I think, that UFOs are metallic or at least physical objects that are created by species to travel interstellar. They aren't like thought forms or whatever. So I think there's that two varying ideas about what UFOs are. He's definitely on the nuts and bolts end of
and
things.
I always thinking from a UFO investigator's point of view, ironically, he tends to have his feet on the ground, doesn't he?
He really does. He really does. I mean, if you don't know Timothy Good, I urge you to go and buy any of his books. I know him because I have a background in radio, and he is a very, very talented orchestral violinist. And it just so happens that I used to work with somebody who made a radio program very regularly with orchestral music, and that's how he knows Timothy. So Timothy had, I think he's an older gentleman now, I don't know if he's retired from it, but he had a completely separate life to his UFO world where he never even spoke about it. His job was being a violinist, and he's a wonderful thinking person. He doesn't come out with wild things. What he does is quote evidence and talk about the evidence, which is why I think he's so compelling. One of the best books to start with would be his 1991 book Alien Liaison, where he talks about the experiences of Jim Evans, a former US Air Force security officer, and his family at their ranch in Colorado in 1975. So these events included cattle mutilations and sightings of a Bigfoot creature and disc-shaped objects, and an eventual encounter with two quasi-human beings who seemed to be in charge. The encounter took place later one night, and they were approximately 5 foot 6 inches tall, these two pseudo-human beings, tight-fitting clothing, and sort of appeared to be wearing a flight suit. Fair, had large eyes, seemed perfectly normal, completely relaxed, blonde short hair, and some sort of cap over the head. But the thing that impressed the most was the eyes. Their facial features were finer. They were almost delicately effeminate and definitely self-assured. During the meeting, and with the aid of a box-like device, the beings demonstrated their complete control over the Bigfoot creature, which, regardless of whether such creatures are indigenous to Earth or not, implies that they are used in subservient roles. That is quite a good level of evidence from a person in a very respected role.
But that what he was describing as not the Bigfoot, but the other kind of humanoid ones, they didn't sound very lizardy, did they?
They didn't sound very lizardy, and that's where I was a little bit disappointed. But
I guess you could go with, remember that series V?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking the whole time through it.
Yeah.
So if you haven't watched V, the lizard people dress up like
humans,
good-looking humans, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, they're always good-looking as well, weren't they?
It was like Beverly Hills 902, 90310
I guess if you can put on a mask to make yourself look like something, you'd probably go for, being good looking, wouldn't you?
Absolutely you would.
Yeah.
And then in 1993, there's another reference from a book by Linda Moulton Howe, Glimpses of Other Realities. A couple were puzzled by bright silver flashes coming from a pasture across the road from their farmhouse. Grabbing a pair of binoculars, they were startled to see two small silver-suited humanoids who appeared to be running their hands over a black cow that was lying on its side and not moving. The small beings moved their hands in odd, jerky movements, and suddenly the cow rose straight up and floated with the beings into a silvery cone-shaped object on the ground nearby. The object's surface was like a mirror and reflected everything around it. Standing by a ramp on the object was a tall reptilian figure that had glaring eyes, slit vertical pupils, and resembled a snake. Standing on the side of the craft was a smaller and heavier, hairier creature resembling a Bigfoot-type being.
So they've made connections.
That also had yellow vertical slits in round green eyes. As soon as the being entered the object with the black cow, it disappeared.
Wow.
Yeah, so that, maybe there is...
That took me back to Cannock Chase.
Yeah, don't. But isn't that strange that we've got these humanoids are in the picture as well as the lizards and the Bigfoot?
Does that account come pre or post the Cassiopeians' description of the lizards and the Sasquatch together?
Pre,
okay. So we had a little bit of this last time from a more skeptic point of view, that I would have thought, because I know a lot of people have come in and out of that project, that it probably attracts people who are interested in these subjects and either consciously and probably subconsciously probably would have read a lot of this material, because so much of it does tie in with alien, paranormal, supernatural, cryptid lore, Lore, doesn't it? And I wonder if it's almost influencing the results they get. I'm not saying they're doing it deceptively, but I wonder if subconsciously it's almost an unconscious bias comes into the way that they work in the project.
Yeah, no, it's very possible. And I mean, we're talking about Bigfoots. There's really only a bunch of explanations for them, apart from just saying it's people's imaginations. Put that to one side. Yeah. They are either an undiscovered ape, a transdimensional being, or aliens. I mean, you struggle to find... Or Tulpa, sorry, okay, yeah, so 4 explanations. You struggle to find another explanation, really.
Yeah. Or a man in a suit.
Well, yeah, but that goes back to... like your imagination, you imagine it, so somebody dresses up to do it. But and then there's this interesting one from Nick Redfern that they reference from 2010, that comes from a chap called Bruce Weaver, whose grandfather told him of an alleged document at Brooks Air Force Base detailing the recovery and analysis of a strange humanoid body recovered in the woods near the John H. Glenn Research Center during a period of intense UAP activity. So they were small, fast-moving orbs of light. From the description, it was a Bigfoot type, 9 feet tall, powerful muscles, short, coarse brown hair, and according to the autopsy, the creature had 32 teeth and human-like vocal cords. Interestingly, though, within its lower left arm was embedded some sort of small metallic device.
Of course it was.
That NASA medical specialists concluded was very likely a type of advanced tracking device and or transmitter. I mean, did they? But, you know.
We're getting back to that black box they were holding.
Exactly. I mean, it's a report. It's a report.
Yeah.
Back to the Cassiopeian tapes. Why have Sasquatch been seen in remote places throughout history? Put there for menial slave tasks, obviously. Does that mean that whenever Sasquatch have been seen here, that there is a lizard nearby? No.
Good question.
What menial tasks might they be doing?
Good question.
Collecting samples. A few reports that are collected are relevant here, and they're going back to Kutchin there for the Footsteps book. In one, 2 Bigfoot were released from a glowing red UFO which had landed on a hillside in California in 1993, and the Bigfoot were observed taking soil samples before the craft vanished into the sky. In 2 others, Bigfoot abducted children, taking them aboard their respective craft. In June 1979, a Washington witness recalled a childhood memory where large hairy hominids took him aboard a craft, all the while controlled by shorter extraterrestrials. In Ontario in 1969, 2 14-year-olds claimed a Bigfoot grabbed them, took them on board a saucer, and they were examined and implanted by smaller beings. The entire time their captor watched from a chair, wires stretching from its hairy head to a nearby machine. And that we have covered this book briefly in the past. In The Brimstone Deceit, Kutchin writes, "What is certain is that people the world over tell legends of giant, smelly, hirsute wild men, fond of abducting women and devouring human flesh." He writes, "Hairy hominids worldwide kill every type of livestock and have a notoriously adversarial relationship with dogs." Right, so that's really similar to the werewolf stuff as well.
I was thinking about James from the Lawmen telling us about Old Stinker at that point.
Right, yes, exactly. They question, why has everyone who has come into contact with the Sasquatch commented on the awful odour of them? Why do they stink? Can you guess why they stink?
Bad hygiene?
Organic functions. What is it about?
We've all got those.
What is it about their organic functions that make them stink? Sweat. So you're right.
They are sweaty.
Poor BO, yeah.
Does make you think though, because you know, Bigfoot's not really a thing here in Britain.
No, we
go more werewolf, don't we?
We do go more werewolf. Is that
confusion between the two, or are they separate things?
I don't know. There are some. In fact, I sent you yesterday, and I'm going to follow up on this. A newspaper report of
a Bigfoot somewhere here.
The Sussex Wildman.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's wrong with our soil samples? Why does it always have to be in America?
John Keel concluded, "For now, we can only assume that the abominable snowman is using the wrong kind of soap." But
it's the cold weather, he doesn't sweat as much.
Oh, well, that's true. That's true. Yeah, although the Bigfoot smelling is not mentioned in all reports, the smell is still very common. The descriptions vary, but the commonality is the stench is unbearably bad. Right. And descriptions of the odour are compared to wet dog, urine, skunk, faeces, garbage, musk, sweat, body odour, and sulphur. But the underlying theme is decaying odours.
Right.
Cow manure, skunk, a mixture of rotten eggs, spoiled potatoes, urine, rotten fish, and human faeces. But a lot worse is the exact description of somebody that is quoted in his book after meeting one. There's obviously something going on with the implication here is that they are definitely beings rather than thought forms, because thought forms don't stink.
Interdimensional beings could stink though, couldn't
they? Interdimensional beings could stink, yes, but that probably, it isn't clear whether an interdimensional being is physical. I mean, it appears to be physical.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Yeah. Bit of a, well, like we said earlier, it's a bit of a get out of jail free card, isn't it? Interdimensional being.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I mean, it's as much of a get out clause as just saying it's the ghost of a dinosaur. It's using words for something, the filling in for something we don't understand. Is what it is. Yeah. And I like this sort of this final bit of the puzzle from 2015. And it says that, so the question is, there's a claim that lots of transdimensional creatures, like Bigfoot and Mothman, are attracted to menstruating women. Is this true? Sometimes, yes. So why is this? Egg harvesting. Right. So I'm guessing they take the eggs to make clones. Close enough, they say. And you're like, right, okay then.
That's the other thing here with I remember this from the last one. Pretty evasive in their answering the questions, aren't they? They're right politicians, whoever they're tapping into.
They really are, yeah. Close enough. Yeah. But it is noted by a journalist, Tim Renner, that Bigfoot seem to have an uncanny ability to locate women who are experiencing their menstrual periods. So that sort of backs up the idea that they're down here to collect samples.
Right.
But then added to this, there is this idea that we go on then to discuss the smell of sulfur. So the questioning goes back to the smell of sulfur, which obviously goes alongside the smell of the devil. That's what we were talking about before.
Yeah, brimstone.
And then the Cassiopeians sort of say, oh yeah, that smell of sulfur, that's a byproduct of the transdimension movement. So like, right, okay then. So the fact that they go around stinking of sulfur, that is because they're moving transdimensionally. And like, yeah, that is true. I don't know. I think we're chasing shadows with this one, to be honest.
Well, I know we on that episode we did on supernatural smells. There was that smell of ghosts, but if that was true, what they've just said there, it's part of the process of travelling interdimensionally. Ghosts and everything would, it's a weird smell, right? Why is poor old Sasquatch more, smelly than a ghost,
Well, yeah, and presumably the Loch Ness Monster would be stinky too.
Yeah, well, the size of that, you'd be able to smell it a mile off, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's true. Well, the very final question that entertained me, and this is only a year old, this was from April session 2023. How many Bigfoot or Sasquatch are there in the US and Canada as of today? They're transdensity and come and go, but close to 1,000.
Well, we'd be seeing them all the time, wouldn't we?
Well, I mean, people claim to see them a lot.
Yeah, America's a big country.
It is a big country.
Any answer of why it's predominantly in America?
No, not really.
Question they asked.
No.
I'm fascinated by the project itself. I think I asked you a little bit of this the last time we talked about it, so apologies if I'm going over old ground. How do they do it again? Do they physically meet up and do this thing, or do they do it on Zoom?
No, the questioners physically meet up, yeah.
And where do they meet? Is that in America?
Yes, they're American, yeah. And
I'd love to sit in on one of those sessions. Be fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is the woman who promotes all of this work and basically set up the Cassiopeian group, her husband is quite a renowned physicist and has written articles. I mean, I won't go into it now because I think I'll probably cover this off in another one, the sort of the how the Cassiopeian Project came into being. But he has written articles which have been in peer-reviewed publications. But he puts a stay in the Cassiopeian Project and has written about it, which has caused him to have problems in his professional life, as you would imagine. Yeah. And not everybody is a fan of the people behind this. There's quite a lot of criticism that this is smoke and mirrors, this is a Ouija board, this is made up. Yeah. But I just think the fascinating thing is that it is very well researched, very well laid out. Yeah. And the answers are just intriguing. It's a different set of answers to... It's a different way of investigating. Like you say, it has its background in many different disciplines of the paranormal world, really. And I think it's worth just regarding it with curiosity. Yeah. And the answers are fascinating.
Because I think what you're describing there is, it comes back to what we say at the top of the podcast, believers, doubters, and in between. from a believer's point of view, you'd probably go, they're onto something there, because actually a lot of what they talk about does kind of connect a lot of dots from paranormal activity, you know, from ghosts to even the alien thing. Oh, you've got the lizards, you've got the greys, then you've got the Sasquatch, makes sense, UFO sightings. Yeah, I guess from a skeptic point of view, you'd go, yeah, it's a bit of a con and they're making this thing up and it's just lots of people almost playing Dungeons and Dragons but pretending it's for real.
That's true. I guess,
but I wonder if there is somewhere in the middle that it's a bit like, you know, remote viewing, tulpas. There's something going on there. I'm not sure we've not connected the dots, if you know what I mean.
I agree. And I think, what do you have to gain? I mean, I'm getting this information off a Substack and then researching off the back of it is very well researched. I'm very grateful to the things that they've put together. I would wonder, I can't see how they're monetizing it. I can't see what they have to gain. Yeah. I think it's a fascinating thing, and to decry it and just say nothing. It's fake would be, that's a bit like saying, you know, that Ouija boards don't exist. And so I think you have to see it, analyze it, and make up your own judgment. I personally don't know what to believe from it.
That sense, the skeptic point of view would probably be more what I was talking about earlier. These are people who are interested in this topic, well researched, and subconsciously during the process they almost join the dots in a narrative that's, you know, that they believe in, but not doing it for any kind of disingenuous way. It's just happening naturally. Like some groupthink in a way. Totally.
Interesting. But you know, it's worth a look. If you hang out on Substacks, go to the Cassiopeian Substack. There's loads and loads and loads and loads of topics on there. I've only picked the two most fascinating to me, but there are loads in there. And you know, I'll have a look back there again next year, and we'll also look at how they came into being. So I think that's a fascinating story.
I'd love to know that, actually. That's really good if there's a whole ep in that. Be interesting if they were doing ones during COVID, if they did any remote ones, if there's Zoom videos, things like that. I'd love to see how they do it and get more into that. And also there's one more thing I need to get out of my system before we go. I need to go one more time.
That is quite rude in Sasquatch language.
Yeah. I was going, bloody lizards. That's what it says.
My next door neighbour's dog sounds a bit like a Sasquatch.
I thought you were going to say my next door neighbour. I think he's a lizard person.
Well, he might be.
He's passing his dog off. It's actually a Sasquatch.
Yeah. I've never seen him eat human food.
That would be so ironic that we've been doing this podcast for years and you haven't realised you're living next to an alien.
That would be amazing, wouldn't
There's
it?
Certain irony there.
Oh, well.
Well, I enjoyed that, and I'm getting a bit fascinated by that project. And like I said, in my mind, I can't work out whether, even as you're talking, we're going through it all. I'm almost going to, this is absurd and funny, to, okay, all right. So, perfect topic for us.
Yeah, I suppose that in a normal pub conversation, somebody would have arrived at the idea that, you know, the Loch Ness Monster might be a ghost and a Sasquatch might be an off-world entity. But, you know, there's some slight evidence to suggest it might be.
But they're not saying the Loch Ness Monster is an alien creature, apart from if it's interdimensional.
No, that's just simply transdimensional. God knows where it goes on the other dimension. They didn't ask that.
That's a good question. Where's the Loch Ness Monster go on holiday?
Yeah. Well, when he's not in this dimension, where is he?
Yeah. All right, I'm glad that's something to think about. Brilliant, Ben. Really enjoyed that. Glad you've been delving into your little Substack. And yes, I don't know what I'm doing next week. I haven't thought about it yet, so I can't really trail it.
That's quite all right.
I have no idea. But yes, we will be back next week with something.
We will. And of course, I couldn't talk about transdimensionality without doffing my cap once again. Ruth Roper Wild, the Transdimensional Sausage, the best story we've ever heard.
Yes.
Not only monsters but sausages, and probably all meat-based products can be transdimensional.
Yeah, and Ruth's got a new book out at the moment, I think. So yeah, go check that out as well, because one of our favourite paranormal people. Well, favourite person, but
a very favourite person.
Yeah, cool.
Anyway, have a lovely week, everybody, and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Are you the quantum mechanics?
One more time.